Hey guys, welcome to video 2. In this video I'm going to be describing how you fuse your cakes, how you fuse your mortars and the racks behind me, how you want to protect that fuse, and last but not least, some setup tips on how to set up these boards at your launch site. Let's get started. Okay guys, here's how we're going to fuse everything up. I have my burn rate chart right here, so I have my seconds per inch. I'm going to use this seconds per inch to kind of help me as I kind of go through. So the first thing I like to do is kind of figure out what the distance is going to be. If you're not good at eyeballing things, you might want to consider using some type of a cloth measuring tape. So I can see right here, the distance between these two fuses is about 6 inches. So after these two cakes, to my next fuse, which is back here, you kind of can't really see it on camera, but that's about 10 inches there. So I'm going from 6 inches to 10 inches. This is only a 7-shot cake, and then this is a 20-shot cake. So this one's going to last a lot longer, so I'm going to want the fuse to go faster from the 7 to the multiple shot cake, because this one's probably going to last a little bit longer. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is just kind of give myself a leeway. I like to give myself a leeway for the initial fuse that I light. And then I can go ahead and attach that onto the cake here. So now that I know I have enough leeway here to give myself some safety when I light the first and only fuse I need to light for my show, I want to go ahead and make the connection to the cake. So when you make your connections, you want to make sure that this fuse on the cake is actually always pointing towards the incoming direction of the ignition source. So the ignition source is going to be running this way, going towards the fuse, and the fuse on the cake is here. So you want to have it like so. And the other thing you want to do is try to keep as much contact as you can of this fuse into contact with the main fuse that's going to be lighting everything. As much surface area as you can. It just increases the likelihood that the cake's going to be going off if you have a larger surface area. So when making your fuse connection, I always find it handy if you go on the bottom, you lay down your main fuse, and then you take your cake fuse and you put that right over the neck, right next to it. You put that right next to it and push down both into the tape, like so. Once you have it kind of like this, you can fold your fuse over on the top, make it nice and tight while you're doing that, and then pinch it down. So now those two fuses should be in contact with one another quite well and for almost the full distance of the fuse that's coming out of the cake. Another thing you can do if you're paranoid like me, you can buy these cheap little 4-inch cable zip ties. I got these from Harbor Freight. They're like 99 cents. You can take one of those little zip ties just to be extra sure. Pull it nice and tight. So now you've got the tape and a zip tie, so there's very little chance that this cake is now not going to go off. So at this point, my main feed fuse is the bigger one, and I'm going to make the connection on the cake right here. But I already know that when I come around this corner and I go down this edge to start going towards my other cake down this way, I need to have a faster fuse because it's 10 inches from this fuse to my next fuse instead of this being 6 inches. So since I know I'm already going to need a faster fuse, what I'm going to go ahead and do is do the same thing I did before. I'm going to go ahead and take my tape, put the main fuse kind of like right in the middle like this. I'll take my cake tape, put it right next to it, and make sure they're touching. They must be touching. And now I'm going to take my faster fuse, and I'm going to go ahead and put that right next to it as well. Now I have all 3 fuses stacked on top of each other. If you ever want to make a transition like this to a faster fuse, I suggest putting all 3 on one connection, just because the amount of heat that's going to be in here is going to actually make it even more likely that all of this is going to light up and go off, that you need to have go off. So once you have all these touching and next to each other, I kind of like Again, you want to make sure they're nice and tight, hold them together, then go ahead and start rolling your tape over the top. Remember, you want this to be nice and tight. And since I have 3 fuses in here, I'm going to choose not to put a zip tie on because that could actually pull the fuses kind of like on top of each other, and then there may not be any surface area contact. So I'm just going to leave it as it is like this. Now that I have my connection, I'm going to take my edge razor cutter. This is the tool that I suggested instead of scissors because it has a razor blade and then a pad here, so when you come down it really reduces the amount of friction that you're going to be putting when you cut a fuse. So I know I don't need my slow fuse anymore right here, so I'm just going to go ahead, come in, little snip, that's it. So now my main fuse goes from slow to fast, and I can take this fast fuse and run it back to my next fuse, which is going to be over here. There's 2 methods for also securing your fuses. Now you can take some tape, which is probably what I'm going to do, especially for these smaller cakes, and just tape the fuse to the side of the cake itself. And that'll keep the fuse nice and tight, so when you're carrying it, there's not all loose and flopping in the field and then risking that you're going to have these come apart in the field. The other type of fusing that you can do will be, if I'll show you on the other side, but I usually leave an inch or so on the edge of the board as I run down parallel, and you can take your fuse and just tape it down to the actual board itself like that and have it travel towards your next cake. Pros and cons to both. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's all there is to fusing. I'm going to go ahead and just run this down to here, and I'm probably going to keep carrying this fuse for a little while. Just vary up, know how long the cakes are going to be shooting for, figure out what speed of fuse you need, and then make your connections. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and start fusing up the rest of my cakes. Okay guys, the fusing is done. So here is a quick peek. You can kind of see, you get the general concept. I got my lead-in fuse here. Most of the show is going to be in the slower visco fuse. However, there are some areas where I needed to use perfect fuse just to kind of speed things up. So again, visco fuse is about 25-30 seconds per foot. Perfect fuse are going to be coming in 10-13 seconds per foot. Around here, you just have to know how long these cakes really last, and then pick the appropriate fuse to go from there. And you can kind of see where I have the boards connect. I just kind of roll a fuse up and leave a tail there, and there's a tail on this end right up here. So when I go ahead and I carry these out into the field and I put these boards right next to each other, I can just connect the fuses afterwards. Kind of minimizes how much work you have to do. This is an area where I kind of mentioned before, like you can either run the fuse on the board itself, sometimes I do that, or you can run it against the cakes themselves, like I've done here. You can see all the fusing here has all been ran along with the cake. So there's 2 methods. I mean, either or works just fine. Okay guys, let's talk about fusing mortars. Now you have a couple different options when you want to do this. If you want, you can go ahead and actually fuse the fuse like this of the actual mortars themselves. And you would just connect them all in one big line. Now, that's kind of like the cheap way of doing it. It works, you can do it, but the con is that you're going to have less control over the speed for which the fuse is actually going to run on the tubes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run my own fuse and make one common fuse that's going to connect all the actual individual fuses going to the shells themselves to one common fuse. So what I've elected to do is I'm probably going to run a slower visco fuse for the first rack, so the first 30 shots will be slower, and then in the other 2 racks that I have are the exact same as this, I'm going to go ahead and run perfect fuse to make it kind of speed up and go faster. Now to kind of help yourself out, what you can do is just kind of go ahead and write something like start or a numbering system like 1, 2. As you can see, I'm going to come down to this end. 1 goes to 2, and then I have an arrow saying my fuse should jump back over to here. 2 goes to 3, 4, then my arrow goes here to 5. Then we come down to 6 with another arrow saying straight across to 7. Then 7 would go down to 8. And then back over to 9. And you get it. You just kind of keep going back and forth until you have all of them fused. The other thing you want to do is go ahead and look down there. Make sure you can see top, or you can see the black cap like that one. That one you can see there's a black cap, and then there's the fuse that runs through a little loop in the middle. As long as you see top or that black cap, you should be good to go, at least if you get X-Cals and these dual layer canister shells. I'm not sure what the other ones are like. So I went through and I double checked all mine, and all mine are good. It would be bad if it was loaded upside down. Okay guys, let's stop looking at it and let's get to work. Okay guys, here it is. One rack is completely fused up, and I started to just kind of tape down the actual main feeder fuse. I like to tape it down out of alignment. Some guys like to have it just go like straight down the middle like this. I wanted to keep it off to the side. That's basically how you fuse up a mortar. I didn't show me loading these shells in. Basically it's X-Cal, 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 and then a dual layer. X-Cal, 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 dual layer. And it just does that over and over again. So basically just drop it in, make sure it's all the way in the bottom. You should hear a thud. You want to make sure you hear that thud. Okay guys, I was running short on time, so fortunately I couldn't do a complete step-by-step process for how to do your mortar racks. But here's what it looks like when I'm done. Essentially, just like in the time-lapse video you saw, you just go ahead and run your fuses, make all your connections. I use zip ties and tape to make my connections. And then once I'm done, I just run a long piece of tape along the side to cover up the fuses. And then the last step I do is I put aluminum foil. I just cut them into strips, and I run a strip down each row of tubes. And then I just run tape along the edge just to go ahead and hold the aluminum foil down. I find that the aluminum foil really helps to prevent any misfires that you might have by fuses jumping where they shouldn't be. This can greatly reduce the chance that that's going to happen on you. Not guaranteed, but at least it'll kind of reduce the chance that it might happen to you. So there's my 3 racks there. Now, before you actually protect your fuses, in my case, I wanted to insert my racks into the show at a certain point. Problem was, I don't know when that was going to happen. After I fused these, I saw I was going to be shy of 6 minutes. Okay, so after calculating how much time I needed on my mortars, I had 358.2 seconds. So as soon as I had that number, I knew how long the racks were going to shoot for. Once I knew I had 358 seconds on my mortar racks, it was just a matter of calculating my time for my fuses. So I would measure a stretch, then calculate the time, and every time I changed types of fuses, I would just calculate that time as I move further and further back. So here's how I actually calculated the time. So I would have a 30-inch stretch times 1 equals 30. So I knew that I had 30 seconds for that 30-inch stretch because that's what that fuse burn rate was at. And then I had another 2 seconds, so I had fast fuse in there. 10 inches at 1, so another 10 seconds. 20.5 inches, burning at a rate of 2.4 seconds per inch, 49.2. And I just kept calculating that back and kept doing a check every once in a while until I finally got to about 356, which was just shy of my overall number. So once I calculated my time, I figured out that this is where I needed to go ahead and run my mortar fuse to. So it actually splices into the main line right here, runs along the side of the cake, down, comes over, and then I have it kind of coming up this cake. Right now I got it in a bag and it's wrapped down, and this is my instant fuse. So this is the really fast stuff that burns like third of a second per foot. So I'm leaving it in the bag, and then once I'm out in the field I can connect it to my starting fuse right here. The last step in the process is protecting your fuses. So you only want to do this once you know you're completely done. And what you do, just go around and take your tape, the green Scotch tape that I had, and you just put it on all your fuses everywhere so that everything is completely covered up. You'll notice if you see all my fuses here, fuses there, covered. My fuse goes along the side of the box here, it's all covered. Around the edges. So you get the general point. Just cover up all your fuses. And now the only spots where I have exposed fuses are where I need to make my board-to-board connection. So I know cats and dogs is going to connect in with this fuse. So I only leave these exposed because I know I have to make my connections once I carry these and I have these at my launch site. So that's pretty much it, guys. This is how I set up my fireworks shows. The last thing I'm going to have for you are just a couple of tips for setting up at your launch site. So one thing you might want to have with you on your launch site is possibly a tarp. I have a Harbor Freight 19 foot by 29 foot, which should cover my entire fireworks thing. I have this tarp because in Michigan we do get rain. Also another choice that you could do is just plastic drop cloth or painter cloth. That also kind of helps if you get rain. At least you have something to protect your fireworks with so that you don't waste all that time and energy and effort. The next thing you might want are going to be wooden blocks. I cut these from 4x4 posts, and it's in 6.5 inches long. So 6.5 inches long and obviously 4x4. I use these 4x4s to give my boards the angles that I need since I angle my boards to shoot out over a body of water. And here's an example of what the boards can look like if you need to shoot them on an angle. You can either lay the boards down broadside like there, or you can stand them up on edge to give yourself a more extreme angle if you need a more extreme angle. And here's a view from the side. So you can see that the board closest to us is not angled quite as aggressively as the other board is that's further away from us. It's angled a little more aggressively. You also might want to bring a tub of supplies with you when you go to your launch site. I have here everything that I've been using, my snippers, fuses, tape. I got extra wood, blocks, stakes, propane torch, tools. Everything that I've been using is basically down and in this tub, and I just carry that with me to the field in case I need any of it. So that's it, guys. All my fireworks are done and ready to go for this year. Thank you for joining me. I hope you learned something as I went through this process. And happy and safe 4th of July to you all.